Welcome. I am author D.M. Patterson, and in this video we are going to talk about character flaws. This will be a continuation of the character development videos that I have been doing, and this is also a continuation of the craft book, The Craft of Character by Mark Botros. I did ask for submissions for an exercise in here, and I did have someone submit to that, so I will be reading that submission at the end of this. To recap a little bit of my video before, Mark talks about how you can sort of build your elevator pitch about what your story is about. But you can also help focus yourself and what you're writing when you put it in the context of it's a story about someone who. One of the examples that Mark gave was The Princess Bride is a story about a swashbuckling hero who teams up with a giant and a revenge-seeking swordsman in order to save the woman he loves from marrying an evil prince. The next layer to that is giving your character a goal. By understanding what a character is pursuing, an audience then understands what motivates your character's behaviors. Everything your character does should be informed by what they want, and this is on page 20. As I continued to read Mark's this is a really incredible book. I highly recommend it. As I continued to read his book, and again, we're layering the development of this character on top of that phrase, it's about a character who. What Mark says on page 96 is, a character trait becomes a flaw when it is a weakness that prevents the character from getting in the way of what they want, informed by past trauma or event. And this really made me stop in my tracks because it's very difficult to remember that there is a very, very fine line between our character traits and who we are and our personalities and a flaw. And by putting this trait becoming something that is getting in the way of the goal of the character, that is what makes it a flaw. It brings this flawed character down to a much more human level. What I mean by that is, if I stopped to think, I need to explain myself as a character to somebody, what would I say my flaws are? By explaining a flaw as a character trait that gets in your way, suddenly I'm thinking of way more things. I'm thinking that I can explain myself and my flaws in way more ways than just, well, I have anxiety. Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of people have anxiety, and a lot of people deal with that in various ways. So what do I want as a person? What is my goal? Well, I want to keep writing. Well, what is a character trait that gets in the way of my writing that would then be seen as a flaw? Well, it's very difficult for me to function in a setting that is not clean. So I tend to procrastinate by cleaning a great deal. I tend to use that as an excuse. And that is where something like a character trait, where I need to have things clean, that in and of itself that's not flawed. But when I allow that procrastination of cleaning to get in the way of my goal of writing, that is my flaw. And what's incredible about giving your characters these character flaws is not everyone is going to have the same flaw. And it allows for that complexity of human nature to really be explored. And I love that Mark explained a character flaw in this way. Because even when we talk about our villains, our antagonists, it's very easy to say that the protagonist is the one that is less flawed, or their flaw is more worthy and it's more redeemable, whereas the villain's flaw, it's obviously a lot more evil, and in nature it's just more vile because it's the antagonist's flaw. So many times we hear when we talk about character development and villains that the villain doesn't always think that they're the villain of the story. They think that they're the hero. In their mindset, they're not doing wrong. Not all the time, but sometimes. But when you bring that other layer of, we're talking about the villain's flaw and what makes the villain, what is getting in the way of the hero's goal, it is something that can be so very close to home. It can be a character trait that everybody has that is just something taken a little bit too far. And then I started thinking about what are some of the other character traits that can actually be seen as a flaw for some characters. You can take somebody who is very, very helpful, and you can turn that very easily into somebody who is a people pleaser, which can then be turned very easily into somebody who puts the needs of others before themselves and can therefore not find the time or ability or energy to meet their own goals. That kind of makes it a funny exercise almost, something that just kind of popped up in my head. If you're having a hard time creating character flaws for your character, if your character were dating somebody else and you had another person talking to the person about your character, what would that person be warning the person your character is dating about? What would the person who does not have the emotional ties of dating your character, or does not have the, the magic and the puppy love associated with your character, which kind of is the author. We have that little bit of that puppy love when we first create our character. It's hard to put any flaws on them. But if we were to look at our character from the best friend who is watching their best friend date your character, what would they say about him? And it's very likely not going to be something that is incredibly villainous that should end them in jail. That's not how we should be looking. Well, at least that's how Mark is saying. That's not how we should be looking at these flaws. Every one of us has something that gets in our way, that becomes something that is keeping us from reaching our goals. Another thing that Mark says on page 152, a flaw is a deeper emotional wound in the character that impacts their chances of achieving their goal. Their flaw constantly threatens their progress and makes them want to return to their normal state and not change. It is an imperfection, a belief, or a bias. It is something that keeps them rooted in their current state. What is it that is keeping your character from jumping out of their comfort zone? And when you take a step back and think about the things that keep you from stepping out of your own comfort zone, it becomes a whole lot easier to put these flaws and these character traits on these characters. When you look at it from the perspective of what is keeping this character from jumping out of their comfort zone, why does this character want to keep the status quo? What is making this character so comfortable that they do not want to change what is happening, even though potentially what is happening is not good? Now, something else that Mark brings up, which I think is a very good point, is this character trait that can be a very normal thing that does not become a flaw for many people is pushed into the flaw category because of a past trauma or event that happens. And that then brings so much more connection and richness into the character, because our traits are a response to our past, good or bad. The way we have developed our personality, the way we develop, dare I say it, coping mechanisms, is how we are responding to the past. Again, good or bad. Stress is stress, whether it's good or bad. What is your response to that? What is your character's response to that? So once again, it's not necessarily that this flaw is going to be something that is so incredibly obvious and bold and everyone can look at it and say, yes, it is a flaw. It can be something as simple, as genuine, as kind, as caring for people. Your character is somebody who cares a great deal for people. But then, due to whatever may have happened in the past or an event that happened, they are putting the the caring for other people above themselves and above reaching their goal. And sometimes we see this on the hero's journey, where the hero does not want to go on their journey because they don't want to leave an ailing father. So that's an example of, it's not bad that a character would want to stay and help an ailing father, but that character trait of wanting to stay and help their father is keeping them from going on the journey that will eventually reach their goal. All of this is creating what I like to call a 3D character. It's really bringing the character off the page for your readers. Now the reader is really invested, because this character, Flaw, is preventing your character from reaching its goal, is actually something very human and very understandable. And now the character has struggles that your reader can really understand and relate to, and that's, for a lot of people, that's what they really enjoy, especially about a protagonist. And on the flip side, for your villain, a lot of people also enjoy, how does this villain, who is very human, is dealing with very human and relatable struggles, how are they dealing with it in such a way that it is creating this tension between the protagonist and the antagonist, and how is this going to resolve in the end? All of these layers and all of these things that you can be thinking about when you're creating your character, they're going to come to play in the scenes that you create and how they interact with other characters. That ends my thoughts on the character Flaw part of Mark Boutros' The Craft of Character book. I wanted to end this video by reading the submission I received from my last video by Jeanne Wilkins. Thank you so much for submitting. Jeanne is a very good friend of mine, and I am so grateful always for your support and encouragement. Jeanne writes, "This is the story of Carlton, a man who is left terrified of failure by his father's shortcomings. Carlton lives in a cocoon of self-imposed perfection, having chosen a career that demands nothing less. His responsibility for an entire household mimics the role he played as a caregiver to his 5 younger siblings." Thank you very much for submitting, Jeanne. I can't wait to read more about the story and see how it develops along the way. Thank you all so much for watching. Thank you for putting up with the sounds of this video. I am so sorry. My neighbor is also doing lawn care. Thank you for putting up with me. I really appreciate it. Now, go write.